Thank you for your interest in Day Optimizer. My name is Trevor Lauber, and I'm the founder of Day Optimizer. Day Optimizer helps you mindfully plan your day so you can accomplish more. It does this by introducing a new system for planning and managing your time. It's designed for entrepreneurs, independent contractors, and other self-employed people who are in control of their own schedule, but who have multiple competing priorities. Today, I'm going to teach you the core concepts of Day Optimizer and how they work together to effectively plan and use your time. I'll show you how to build a schedule in Day Optimizer and how to use that schedule to manage your time throughout your day. At the end of the webinar, I'll open it up for questions, either about Day Optimizer specifically or time management in general. This webinar is being recorded. To receive a copy of the recording, just send me a quick email saying, please send me the webinar recording to trevor@dayoptimizer.com. Before I get started, let me tell you a little bit about myself and why I created Day Optimizer. I've been self-employed for over 20 years, and most of that time fully in control of my schedule. My ability to determine my priorities, avoid getting distracted, and maintain my focus during the day directly affects how much work I can produce, how much money I can earn, and how much free time I have left over to maintain a good work-life balance. Many years ago, I developed a 3-step process for building a daily schedule to help me make better trade-offs with my time and stop overscheduling myself. It had the side benefit of keeping me focused and productive. For years, I did the process on paper, copying to-dos from one day to the next and rewriting the same things over and over again. Day Optimizer is a streamlined version of that process that I've enhanced and extended. You can now use Day Optimizer both to plan your day and to adjust your priorities in real time throughout the day. I use Day Optimizer almost every day now, and I'm far more productive on the days I use it than the days I don't. I have more focus, fewer distractions, and prioritize my time better. Many of my customers say the same thing. While no productivity tool works for everyone, I hope you find that Day Optimizer works for you. Now let's dive in. Day Optimizer helps you convert your daily to-do list into a daily schedule. But what is a daily schedule and why do you need one? A daily schedule captures everything you plan to do in your day, helping you to make better decisions around what tasks you can realistically accomplish and how and when to do those tasks. By accounting for everything that takes up time in your day, from tasks and appointments to daily activities like eating, lunch, and exercise, you're less likely to overestimate how much time you have in your day so you can focus on what's important. On the screen, you can see a schedule created by Day Optimizer. It lists everything we plan to do today and when we plan to do it. The when is important. By committing to when you plan to start and stop each to-do, you are sending what psychologists call implementation intentions. And the research indicates that setting these intentions increases your chances of achieving your goals. By setting a start time for a trigger, you create an objective trigger for when to start a to-do. If you schedule a task at 10 a.m. and it's 10 a.m., it's hard to deny now isn't the right time to start that task, since earlier you yourself decided it was. For things you are likely to procrastinate on, this objective time trigger creates a moment of mindfulness, which can nudge you to get started. It isn't perfect by any means, but it helps. By setting an end time, you create another moment of mindfulness. In this moment, you get to decide if the to-do you are working on is the most important thing in your day, and you should keep working on it, or if it's a lower priority, and you should move aside and move on to the next to-do. Notice I didn't say you always stop working on what you're working on when you hit the end of your allocated time. Using Day Optimizer isn't about creating schedules that you follow perfectly. It's to help you reason about your time so you're making effective decisions about what to do with your limited time in your day. Rarely will you be able to execute your schedule exactly as you planned, but that doesn't negate the value of the plan or the planning process. Now let's assume it's 11 a.m. and I decide that sending March invoices isn't the most important thing to work on today. I've spent an hour working on it, but it's now time to move on. I really need to pay my taxes. I'll continue sending those invoices tomorrow. In a traditional task management application, you would leave the task unchecked, since it's not yet complete and you don't want to lose it. But Day Optimizer introduces the concept of done today versus done forever. If I click the checkbox once, it marks the task done today by putting a check mark in a circle and crossing out the task. This allows me to get that dopamine rush of accomplishment, but unlike a traditional task manager, I won't lose the task. Tasks marked done today flow to the next day and become options for us to add to our schedule tomorrow. This concept of unfinished tasks flowing from day to day is called the task flow, and is one way Day Optimizer helps you juggle multiple competing priorities that take more than one work session to get done. Now, say I spent the hour working on the task and I finish it. If I click the checkbox a second time, it turns into a check mark in a filled circle. This indicates the task is done forever. Tasks marked done forever disappear from the task flow, so they won't appear as options tomorrow, but are still accessible on the task page. Now, so far we've been talking about specific tasks you need to get done. Day Optimizer also has the concept of activities and appointments. While tasks are things that take up time in your day that will eventually be done, activities are things that take up time in your day that will never be done, like lunch and exercise. You are never done eating lunch. You are done eating lunch when you're dead. Activities within Day Optimizer can't be overdue and don't flow to the next day. If you meet eating lunch one day, you don't have to eat 2 lunches tomorrow. You either ate lunch or you didn't, and a new day is a new day. Thus, activities don't participate in the task flow and can only be marked either done or not done. Now, if you're doing task management, you don't need to account for most activities. Few people put lunch on their to-do list. But if you're doing time management, you need to account for this time so you don't overestimate what you can get done in a day. The other thing we use activities for are time blocks. Time blocks are when you're setting aside time in your day to do a type of activity, but the specific tasks are not kept in Day Optimizer. They may be in Asana, Basecamp, Excel, or even in your head. In the case of email, the task is your inbox. Using activities, Day Optimizer helps us block out our day so we're working on important projects and moving them forward. On this schedule, you can see we've scheduled networking and email blocks in the morning and 2 time blocks to work on client work in the afternoon. Appointments are yet another category of to-do that has special properties within Day Optimizer. Appointments are automatically imported from your calendar or can be added manually. Appointments are fixed points in your day that you must schedule your other to-dos around. If you have a doctor's appointment at 2 p.m., you can't suddenly show up at 10 in the morning. When adding appointments to your schedule, Day Optimizer allows you to account for travel time there and back. So my schedule has my 2 o'clock appointment starting at 1:45, which is when I need to leave to get to the doctor's office on time. And it doesn't end until 3:15 when I get back to the office. Like activities, appointments don't participate in the task flow. You either went to an appointment or didn't. If you didn't, you may need to reschedule, but that creates a new appointment. It doesn't automatically flow to the next day. Thus, like activities, appointments can either be marked done or not done. Now let's see how we build a schedule in Day Optimizer. Each day when you open up Day Optimizer, you'll be brought to the Today screen and told you don't yet have a schedule created. Click on either the Start Planning button or the Create button to start building your schedule. They both take you to the same place. Day Optimizer uses a 3-step planning process. I'll explain why there's 3 steps in a minute, but let me first explain the layout of the screen. On the left-hand side, you can see your options for the day. These include unfinished tasks from previous days that are currently in your task flow, appointments imported from your calendar, daily activities and time blocks that are active for today, and tasks that you haven't started on. The right-hand side of the screen contains your commitments for the day. These are things you have decided to work on. These are the things that you have decided to work on. Each day, this starts off blank, and you explicitly commit to what you plan to do. This commitment process serves 2 purposes. First, it creates a psychological commitment to the task, which makes you more likely to do it. Second, it filters out all the other tasks that you don't plan to work on, so you aren't distracted by them. Once you leave the screen, you won't see them again until tomorrow. That second point is important. If you're used to a traditional task manager, every time you open it up throughout the day, you see all your tasks, many of which you won't get around to. For most people, looking at that list adds extra stress and distracts them from their tasks. By removing these irrelevant tasks entirely from your view, Day Optimizer helps you focus only on those to-dos you deliberately commit to doing. Of course, if you get everything done, you can always go back and add more, but most people are time optimists and they think they can get way more done in their day than they actually can. Reducing the available options helps them focus more on what's important. To commit to a to-do, press the plus sign. This moves the task over to the commitments column. If you decide you don't want to do a to-do you previously added, press the minus sign to move it back to the left-hand column. Let's commit to what we're going to do today. I have 4 unfinished tasks. These are tasks that I committed to on a previous day that I didn't mark done forever, so they remain in my task flow. Let's say I'm going to work on redesigning the website and researching loan options, but I'll leave paying taxes and switching banks for another day. Again, these are options for today, not things I have to do, so feel free to leave tasks in the left-hand column. Next are my appointments. Again, these are automatically imported from my calendar. You may see appointments here that you don't plan on attending. You may also have optional meetings on your calendar or other people's appointments that are important for you to know about, but that you won't be going to. Just leave these on the left-hand side. Only appointments that you commit to by pressing the plus sign will be added to your schedule. Activities are things that take up time in your day that are never done. You can see here we've configured Day Optimizer for 2 types of activities. Daily activities like lunch and meditation, and time blocks like marketing and process email. Today, we'd like to eat lunch, exercise, and meditate. So let's add those to our schedule. We also need to remember to take our vitamins. We'll also schedule 2 blocks for checking email, 1 in the morning and 1 in the afternoon. And we need more clients, so let's schedule a block in networking. Finally, let's schedule 2 work blocks to work on our client work. Oops. And a strategy block so we can ensure our networking and website strategy is still alignment in our goals. And finally, let's make sure that we remember to schedule tomorrow. Finally, we've come to the tasks we haven't yet started. These are tasks you entered into Day Optimizer to remember for the future. While Day Optimizer is primarily a time management application, it does have basic task management capabilities to help you manage important tasks. For today, we're just going to commit to review Q1 performance. Now, while we're going through this process, you might remember a task you didn't previously add. Well, you can always click Add to add the task, and then the plus sign to commit to it. The commitments list has a special quick add box at the top that will create a task and commit to it immediately. For instance, we just remembered to order more printer paper. So let's add that to our list. Order more printer paper. We hit enter to add it to the list. Use the commitments quick add to easily add new commitments or when you're pulling tasks over from your existing task manager. There are no quick add for appointments and activities, since appointments are usually imported automatically and activities are usually configured in advance. If you need to add an appointment or activity, use the add buttons in their respective sections and then use the plus sign to commit to them. Before we leave the screen, let me show you one last feature. Remember those tasks we didn't add from our unfinished tasks? Switching banks is no longer relevant. I've decided now is not the time to switch banks, so I'm not going to finish this task. Ideally, I'd like to remove it from my task flow so I don't see it every day. By clicking on the task, I can open up the quick view panel. This tells me the task is in progress, which means I marked it done previously but never finished it and marked it done forever. If I click the icon, a menu comes up and I can select the status won't do. This removes a task from my task flow and marks it as a task that I never finished. If I have several items whose tasks I like to change, I don't need to open the quick view panel for each. I can click on the plus sign while pressing the Option key on a Mac or the Alt key on Windows. And I bring up the action menu and can immediately select won't do from there. Okay, now we have our list of commitments for today. Let's move on to the next step. If the list looks a little long, don't worry. We'll have the option to uncommit from to-dos later as we go through the planning process. The second step in our planning process is the allocate step. This is another place where Day Optimizer differs from other time and task management tools. In Day Optimizer, we don't estimate time, we allocate it. Time estimation is figuring out how long a task will take to complete, which for complex tasks or tasks we've never done before is really hard to get right. Redesigning the website could take 4 hours or it could take 40 hours. depending upon the problems we run into. Instead, in Day Optimizer, we allocate time. Time allocation is figuring out how much time to spend on a task today, which is much easier than time estimation. If a task is important, to get it done, we need to allocate time to it each day, regardless of its time estimation. By allocating time, you keep your important tasks moving forward and are better able to balance amongst multiple competing priorities. Now you'll notice several of our to-dos already have time allocation set. When you create an activity, you can specify how long you usually do that activity for. This is just a default though. For instance, while our default is to exercise every day for an hour, today we only have 30 minutes. So we can change it here. The next time we exercise to our daily schedule, it will be back at an hour. We've only changed the time allocated today, not the default allocation. If we don't set a default time allocation for an activity, we'll be asked to choose a time allocation each time we commit to it. This is useful for activities that vary a lot. For instance, I have dinner as an activity, but without a default time allocation, because some days I cook dinner and it takes an hour to prepare and eat, while other days I eat leftovers and it only takes half an hour. Appointments default to the duration of the appointment, but this might not be the actual time required for the appointment, especially if you need to travel to get there. Let's say our doctor's office is 15 minutes away. So for the 1 hour appointment, we need to allocate an hour and a half, with 15 minutes to get there, an hour for the appointment, and 15 minutes to get back. Next, we go down the list of remaining to-dos and allocate time for each of them. Tasks don't have time allocations since it's important to decide each day how much time to spend on them. Let's spend an hour and a half on that website redesign, an hour researching loan options, half an hour on our strategy review, and maybe an hour reviewing a Q1 performance, and 15 minutes ordering that printer paper. Take vitamins I'm going to leave unallocated. It doesn't really take up time in my day. I'm just using it as a reminder. Now is a good time to explain why we have 3 different steps. We use 3 steps because it helps us build a more realistic schedule for 3 reasons. First, it limits context switching in our brain. Second, it leverages our working memory. And third, it minimizes our psychological biases, our tendency to cheat ourselves. Let me explain what I mean by each of those. When we are developing a schedule, we have to do several different types of thinking. First, we have to brainstorm everything we need to do today. Then we need to analyze each to-do to determine how much time to spend on it. Finally, we need to solve that puzzle of how we can fit all these to-dos together effectively, essentially playing Tetris with our time. Each of these steps, brainstorming, analyzing, and puzzle solving, uses different ways of thinking. And just like how multitasking makes us less efficient with our time, constantly switching between different cognitive modes makes us less efficient with our thinking. A key reason for this is our working memory. When we're on the commit step in brainstorming, we need to load all the to-dos we've committed to today into our working memory and ask the question, what am I missing? We're looking for the gaps. In the allocate step, we're instead analyzing how much time to allocate to each to-do. What helps here is to be able to use our working memory to compare the allocations between items. For instance, if I allocate 30 minutes for lunch, I need to allocate at least 30 minutes for dinner. By allocating all our to-dos in a single step, we create better time allocations, which results in a better schedule. But the 3 steps are not just to leverage our working memory and thinking modes. They're also to help minimize our psychological biases, our tendency to cheat ourselves. Imagine if instead we built our schedule 1 to-do at a time. First, we brainstorm what we need to do, then we allocate a time, then we schedule it. Then we brainstorm another thing, allocate it, schedule it. What happens often as people do this is that as they see the remaining time for the day run out, consciously or unconsciously, they start to underestimate the time they allocate to to-dos. That task that should take me an hour, I can get that done in 30 minutes. That activity that takes me 30 minutes normally, I can get that done in 15 minutes. Most of us are time optimists and want to fit in as much into our day as we can. But to create a realistic schedule, we need to fight the impulse to underallocate our time. While we can change the allocations on the schedule step by committing to the time we think we realistically need for each task before we even look at our schedule, we're less likely to cheat ourselves in our planning. The 3 discrete steps don't eliminate the problem entirely, but greatly reduce it. That's also why we don't have a total at the bottom of the amount allocated. So you don't start adjusting your allocations based on your expectations of your available time too early. There'll be time to make those adjustments in the next step. In this step, the goal is to make realistic time allocations. The final step of building our schedule is to assign our to-dos to specific times in our day. On the left-hand side is a list of everything we have scheduled, and the right-hand side is our schedule. The first thing I recommend people do is to ensure the start and end times for your schedule are correct. Press the Configure button to configure these times. If these are your regular times, check the Set as Default checkbox. This will save them as your default start and end time. For today, we're going to schedule our time from 9 until 5. Next, we need to schedule our day. While eventually we'll support drag and drop, because Day Optimizer is designed to work on mobile devices too, with limited screen space, right now to schedule a to-do, you click the drop-down menu next to the time you want to schedule. Looking along the left-hand side of the drop-down, it might seem like the items aren't sorted, but if you look along the right-hand side, it will make sense. Right now, commitments are sorted from the longest duration to the shortest. If you're familiar with Stephen Covey's Schedule Your Big Rocks First, this will make sense. If not, just know that the commitments with the longest durations are at the top and those with the shortest are at the bottom. To build our schedule then, we click the drop-down next to the time we want to schedule and select a commitment. Let's start off the day with our client work session. And now it's added to our schedule. Now we can go down our day and schedule each commitment. After that, let's research loans. Then process our morning email. We don't have to go in order though. Let's go schedule that doctor's appointment. It's scheduled for 2 p.m., so I'll need to leave at 1:45 to get there on time. Great. Now let's finish building our schedule. Let's eat lunch at noon, then review our Q1 performance after that, and meditate right before the doctor's appointment. Then let's work on the website redesign and end the day by scheduling tomorrow. Now we've filled our schedule, but we still have more commitments. This is extremely common. Well, the more you use Day Optimizer, you'll get better at figuring out how much you can fit into your day. You'll often have days where you've committed to more than you can get done. That's okay. That is part of the process. It forces you to prioritize. I like to call this part of the process implicit prioritization, because instead of deciding priorities up front, which can be useful in some circumstances, we're setting our priorities based on what we decide to schedule and not schedule in our day. Let's look at our schedule. It doesn't make sense to start the work on the website redesign until we've confirmed our strategy. So I'm going to remove redesigning the website from my schedule by pressing the minus button. Now I'm free to add the strategy session in its place and another client work session. Now I've decided not to do the website redesign today, but it's still on my list of commitments for the day. Again, a key goal of Day Optimizer is to remove everything from your list except what you'll actually be working on, so we can retain our focus throughout the day. So we're going to uncommit from the redesign website. This removes the redesign website from my list of commitments for today. It's as if I never committed to it on the commit step. It doesn't delete it though. It will still be available as an option to commit to it in the future. Now I'm looking at my schedule and realize I really need to get my daily exercise, but there's not enough time to fit it in. However, maybe I don't need to spend a full hour and a half on that first client work session. What if I reduce that to an hour and exercise afterwards? To change the time allocation for an item, I click the item to open the quick view panel, then press the edit button. From here, I can set a new time allocation and press save. Before we finalize our schedule, let me go and add that exercise. Before we finalize our schedule, we realized it would be more effective to review our Q1 performance before researching our loan options. This will also better align with our energy throughout the day. Eventually, we'll have the option to drag and drop. Eventually, we'll have the ability to drag and drop options. But for now, you need to remove each item from the schedule using the minus sign, and then add each one back in using the drop down. Finally, we still have some items left unscheduled. Let's uncommit from the ones that we're not going to do today. Unfortunately, we can't do the networking. We already have some email. We're not going to do that in the afternoon. And unfortunately, we won't be able to order our printer paper today. I'm going to leave take vitamins as a reminder there for me. As we'll see in a minute, the Today dashboard has a place to keep track of items like these. Now our schedule is complete. We press done to finalize the schedule. Now we're back to the Today screen with our schedule for the day. Much like the schedule I showed you at the beginning, let's go over a few basic things I skipped before. The unscheduled commitment box contains all those to-dos we committed to doing today that we didn't add to our schedule. Usually you want this to only contain reminders like take vitamins, but it can also act as an inbox for things that come out throughout the day that you'd like to work on schedule later on. For instance, Bob called this morning and asked if we can send him a copy of the report that we did last week. By clicking into the quick add input box at the top of the unscheduled commitments, we can add that as something to work on later today. Let's add send report to Bob. Once again, I press enter to add it to the list. Now imagine it's lunchtime. We did our client work and processed our email and exercised, but we were on a roll with our client work. So we decided to defer researching the loan options to make sure or decide to defer the Q1 performance to make sure we exercised. We also added an unscheduled commitment we need to work into our schedule. And our doctor just called to cancel our appointment. Time to reschedule our day. Eventually, there'll be specific workflows to help you reschedule your day. But for now, we need to go back through the three-step planning workflow. Click Edit to go back to the commit step. If we wanted to add new commitments here, we could, but for now, we just want to rearrange our existing commitments. So we click Next. On the Allocate step, we'll add 30 minutes to sending that report to Bob to type up some notes and send that report. Everything else is already allocated. So let's click Next. Now we're back on the schedule step. Our doctor's appointment got canceled, so let's come down here and uncommit from it. That leaves us an hour and a half that's free. Next, let's remove that Q1 performance option that we didn't get to in the morning and schedule it in the same time we previously were leaving for the doctor's appointment. Then we'll be scheduling, sending that report to Bob right after that. Okay, our schedule looks good. Let's click done to get back to the Today dashboard. We continue working through our day and it's now 2 p.m. We're running behind schedule. We had a few interruptions and fell behind. What should we prioritize for the rest of the day? Can we work a bit late to catch up? And if so, how late? By pressing the Views button at the top of the schedule, we can activate the projections. This adds a box to the top of our schedule that tells how much remaining time we have allocated for the day and when we're projected to finish if we do everything. Think of it like a GPS, constantly updating what your ETA for your end of your day will be. Based on current projections, we won't be finished until nearly 6 p.m. We really want to be wrapped up by 5. Let's make some adjustments to do that. Now, we could go through and reschedule everything using the three-step planning flow, but at this point in the day, it's easier to just work from the current schedule and mark off the items we're not going to do. By opening the quick view item on a panel, we can click the status item and switch the status to skip today. This keeps the commitment for today, but indicates we decided not to do it. It also grays out the item on our schedule, so it's easier to ignore. Let's do that right now for researching loan options. Notice that once we set the status to skip, our remaining effort and projected end date updated. As mentioned before, we can access the full status menu by just clicking the Option key on Windows or the Option key on Mac or the Alt key on Windows while clicking the Action button. That brings us to future tasks. As you work through your day, you'll often think of tasks you don't want to do work on today, but that you want to save for the future. Using the Quick Add input box at the top of the New Futures tasks, we can quickly add new tasks for the future. Let's add a task for paying our quarterly taxes. There we go. But we don't need to worry about that for a few weeks. Instead of having it appear as an option every day, we can snooze it until it becomes relevant. To do that, we open the Quick View panel, click Edit, and enter a snooze date, and then click Save. The task now won't appear during our planning process until this date. It remains accessible on the task screen if you need to access it beforehand. That's the basics of Day Optimizer. Day Optimizer also has other features like checkmark lists for subtasks and historical calendar visualizations that help you track your habits or highlight when you keep committing to a task but not working on it. You'll receive documentation about some of these in your welcome email. Before I wrap up, let's look at a few last things. So far, everything we've done has started from the Today screen. But what if you're one of those people who like to plan the night before? Clicking the Schedules option on the left-hand menu brings us to a calendar. Days colored green are days where we use Day Optimizer to create a schedule. We can click on any day to see exactly what we committed to that day and what we accomplished. We can also use the schedule screen to schedule future days. By clicking on tomorrow, you'll see no schedule has been created yet. Clicking the Create Schedule button to start the three-step, we can click the Create Schedule button to start the three-step planning flow for that day. Whether you plan your day in the morning or the night is a matter of preference, with users doing both. Theoretically, you can plan your entire week this way, but I recommend against it. It's hard to predict what you'll need to do on an hour-by-hour basis 3 or 4 days from now until you know what you were able to accomplish today. Still, the capability is there if you choose to use it. Before I open it up for questions, I want to talk briefly about how Day Optimizer works on mobile devices. Day Optimizer is designed to run on both desktop and mobile devices. In your welcome email will be instructions on how to install Day Optimizer on your phone or tablet. Most of the mobile interface is self-explanatory, but one thing is important to mention. Let's go back to the Today screen. Notice how it has 3 boxes: your schedule, unscheduled commitments, and new future tasks. On a mobile device, we don't have room to show all these on the same screen. Instead, these become 3 separate screens. Let me show you what I mean. If we shrink the browser to the size of a smartphone, we can see the user interface switches into mobile mode. Now our screen contains today's schedule only. To access the unscheduled commitments or new future tasks, you can swipe left or right or use the arrow keys on the dark gray toolbar. The same applies if you are building a schedule. Each of the commitment steps are on separate screens. Swipe left to move to the next category of things to commit to. Once you hit the Finalize Commitment screen, then press the green button to move to the at the top to move to the allocation step. Other than that, Day Optimizer works like a normal mobile app, with the menu accessible using the 3 horizontal lines in the upper right-hand corner. That's the end of the Day Optimizer onboarding. To get started with Day Optimizer, go to my.dayoptimizer.com in your browser. And click on the Create One Now link at the bottom of the page underneath the Don't Have an Account Yet.